On January 22nd at 23:59 Yemen time, the US-UK coalition forces launched a fierce second joint strike against Houthi missile and drone infrastructure. This marks the 8th round of engagement with the Houthi armed forces. The USS Dwight D. Eisenhower E-2 Hawkeye, Boeing EA-18G Growler, and Boeing FA-18EF Super Hornet took off one after another. Other U.S. warships launched Tomahawk cruise missiles from deep within the Red Sea. The UK Royal Air Force's Eurofighter Typhoons joined this aerial blitz, equipped with Paveway 4 precision-guided bombs. They took off with full thrust from the sovereign base areas of Akrotiri, heading straight for the target. This military operation was named, quote, Operation Poseidon Archer. Poseidon, the Greek god of the sea, also controlling earthquakes and horses, symbolizes the US military's dominance at sea and its diverse combat capabilities in various battlefield environments. Archer metaphorically represents their precision and covert operational abilities. It is reported that the US-UK coalition precisely bombed 8 strategic points of the Houthi armed forces, with clear and explicit targets. Within a few hours, key targets in Yemen cities such as Sana'a, Taiz, Hajjah, Baida, and Hodeidah were hit hard, with flames and thick smoke rising into the sky. The US-UK airstrikes against the Houthi seemingly opened the door of victory for the Yemen government. According to The Guardian, the deputy head of the Yemen Presidential Leadership Committee, Major General Aidarus al-Zobaidi, publicly called for the US and its Western allies to intensify strikes against the Houthis. He firmly demanded that the West provide weapons, train ground troops, and share intelligence to jointly combat the Houthi armed forces. Major General al-Zobaidi warned that relying solely on airstrikes would not eliminate the threat posed by the Houthis. Meanwhile, the US military's deployment in the Middle East is quietly unfolding. First is the Ocean Jazz, a mega-transport ship. Since January 8th, it crossed the Strait of Gibraltar to Sicily and entered the Suez Canal, mysteriously turning off its transporter before arrival. By the 22nd, it almost silently reached the southwestern tip of Saudi Arabia in the Red Sea. At this time, the Houthis claimed to have hit Ocean Jazz with a missile, but the US military denied this attack. This is significant, indicating that the Houthis can obtain satellite imagery and also accurately target ships like Ocean Jazz in the vast sea. This subtly suggests Chinese Communist Party support in the background. Since 2017, Ocean Jazz has been chartered by the US military, transporting military equipment ranging from UH-60 Black Hawk helicopters to Apache, Humvees, and armored vehicles. This time, after loading and unloading at Spain's naval station Rota and Greece's Sauda Bay, it headed for the Red Sea, evidently destined for the US military's camp Lemonnier in Djibouti, indicating that more US military forces and resources are being planned to strike against the Houthi armed forces. The deployment of Ocean Jazz represents a significant enhancement of US military forces and resources in the southeastern Middle East region. Next, let's look at the movements of the USS Bataan, an American amphibious assault ship. On January 20th, the vessel entered the Sauda Bay naval base in Greece, unloading armored vehicles and marines. At a critical moment, when Israel is escalating tensions on the Lebanon border, such a move by the Bataan suggests it does not plan to engage directly in ground combat. Generally, if an amphibious assault ship is not executing a landing mission, it would switch to a sea control mission. After unloading armored vehicles, the Bataan might be loaded with naval aircraft and ammunition, possibly in preparation to support Israeli airstrikes. So where did the unloaded armored vehicles and marines go? They are likely still in Sauda Bay, meaning they could be deployed to the Red Sea at any moment. It seems possible that landing operations might occur in the Red Sea region, although not immediately, as the current focus is on intensive aerial bombardment. However, each airstrike could be a signal for a landing operation, with every airstrike evolving into ground combat. Western media on January 21st suggested that the US-UK coalition might occupy coastal areas of Yemen, hinting at an escalation of the war. Especially considering the UK's previous leaks, this news doesn't seem to be mere speculation. By the evening of the 22nd, the EU's statement seemed like a dramatic climax, announcing a joint military operation that appeared to pave the way for an escalated operation by the US-UK coalition. Defensive actions involving France, Germany, Italy, and other countries provide the US-UK coalition with space for further action. The Houthi armed forces, not to be outdone, are facing potential US landing threats by deploying a large number of mines and explosive boats along the Red Sea coast. Elite forces from Hezbollah and the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps have arrived to assist the Houthis in planning a more extensive blockade. Their plan, not limited to the Red Sea, includes blockades of the Suez Canal and the Strait of Hormuz, which, if successful, would be a major blow to oil supplies for Israel and the entire Western world. Since the US-UK coalition forces began airstrikes against the Houthis on January 11th, Iran, a supporter of the Houthis, has also joined the conflict. On January 20th, the US military base in Al-Assad, Iraq, was attacked by 7 rockets, and within a day, missile attacks occurred in Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, and Yemen. This indicates an increasing risk of a broader regional conflict between Iran and its proxies and the United States and its allies. Intelligence gathered by the United States shows that Iran's support for the Houthi armed forces in terms of weaponry is increasing. Meanwhile, the fleet of the United States and its allies operating in the Mediterranean Middle East region has reached 104 ships, facing escalating threats. The spread and escalation of this war are not just an expansion of military operations, but a struggle over geopolitical interests. The strategic intentions and political maneuvers behind it are the core of this conflict. Iran's goal is to annihilate Israel and drive American influence out of the Middle East. In this tense standoff in the Middle East, US military actions have shown a high degree of precision and strategy. In the 7 rounds of intensive strikes since January 11th, many were executed at the very moment the Houthi armed forces were preparing to attack, with US missiles immediately destroying Houthi launch facilities. Each round of strikes is based on the latest intelligence, and each advancement is a calculated result, especially the latest round of strikes targeting weapons warehouses buried deep underground. At the same time, the weapons deployment strategy of the US-UK coalition has become more refined. Compared to previous airstrikes in Kosovo, this operation focuses more on precision strikes, abandoning traditional carpet bombing. For example, the UK's first strike uses a limited number of Paveway precision-guided bombs, and the US mainly relied on ship-launched cruise missiles and guided bombs fired by Super Hornets, conducting targeted strikes based on real-time intelligence. Furthermore, each round of missile and warhead use generates a large amount of data for the US Department of Defense for procurement feedback. For instance, the Thor ballistic missiles have specific metrics for explosive yield, penetration depth, and accuracy. After evaluating the effectiveness of the strikes, this data is analyzed in detail to make improvements in the next batch of production in military factories. Such precision and continuous improvement are not present in countries like China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea. They often disregard human rights and civilian casualties, simply deploying weapons. In contrast, although the US approach seems more cumbersome, it continuously enhances its military capability and precision in technology, which is undoubtedly helpful for executing more specialized and complex tasks in the future. In the Middle Eastern power play, the military strategy and technological superiority of the US and the West have been fully demonstrated. The high interception rate of ground-based air defense systems and Aegis-equipped ships and Israel's precision decapitation operations are clear proofs of Western military strength. This time, the Middle Eastern battlefield we foresee will be significantly different from past wars. Faced with the potential of a comprehensive strike against the Houthi armed forces, Saudi Arabia has become an anxious player. Its foreign minister expressed concern about the tensions that a comprehensive strike by the US forces against the Houthis might bring. Saudi Arabia's worries are not just about instability in the Red Sea, but also a deeper fear for the security of their monarchy. They fear a repeat of the 2011 Egyptian Jasmine Revolution, which caused many Middle Eastern dictators to lose power, with only al-Assad, president of Syria, backed by Russia, escaping this fate. Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates, originally US Gulf partners, are now following al-Assad's lead and closely collaborating with Russia, as confirmed by the Russian foreign minister. Facing this new geopolitical landscape, decisions by the Biden administration may affect not only the United States itself, but also China and Russia. We cannot yet predict the scale and outcome of this drama, but one thing is certain. The defection of these former US allies will be a significant turning point. Strategically, before engaging in ground combat with the Houthis, the US military must first consider the political landscape following a potential victory. Looking back at conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan, power vacuums left by the US have often been quietly filled by countries like China and Russia. To digress, the current situation in Gaza poses a similar dilemma, whether to allow Palestinians to govern themselves or to keep the area under effective Israeli control. Opting for Palestinian self-management could follow the path of China and Russia, potentially leading to a repeat of 2023 Hamas-led attack on Israel on October 7th. The Israeli government is uncompromising on this issue, insisting on controlling the security west of the Jordan River. On the 21st, Netanyahu firmly rejected proposals from the US, Europe, and the United Nations to establish a Palestinian state. Consequently, Hamas is trying every means to pressure Israel. On January 21st, Hamas political leaders held official talks in Turkey, surprising international opinion. The Turkish government quickly explained that the talks were discussions on a ceasefire, increasing humanitarian aid, releasing hostages, and achieving permanent peace. However, we all know that Hamas, a terrorist organization, hardly cares about these issues. Their so-called ceasefire seems more like a breather for Hamas. After all, Hamas is militarily incapable of victory and is now seeking a breakthrough in political maneuvering. It's likely that Hamas discussed exactly this with Turkey, how to pressure Netanyahu with a political solution. The day before, they were in Moscow talking with the Russian deputy foreign minister. Although they claimed it was for releasing Russian hostages, this was a pretext. In the Middle East, China and Russia have their envoys. Releasing a few hostages doesn't require a trip to Moscow. Hamas's contact with Russia is planning a major counterattack against the West, possibly involving deep military cooperation. Indeed, the next day there were reports of the Kremlin threatening to deploy troops on the Syria-Israel border, obviously knowing that the US and Israel might turn their attention to Lebanon and Syria. Russia's involvement will inevitably bring China fully into this complex situation, and the US will also participate, rapidly escalating the conflict in the Middle East. In such circumstances, for the US, a political solution after military action must be in place before launching ground operations against the Houthi armed forces. The US approach to China follows a similar pattern, with decades of cooperation being a strategic balance and compromise. China has cleverly used this psychological tactic, showing that the Chinese people seemingly cannot do without the Communist Party. For the US, the only choice in this scenario is to cooperate with China while constraining the Chinese Communist Party, rather than opting for a direct decapitation strike against Zhong Nanhai. In the US, Trump and his supporters have awakened a more isolationist trend within the country. They question why the US should venture globally and not focus on its land and people. Their view is that the US should no longer support Israel or deploy troops overseas, deeming these unnecessary sacrifices. At this critical moment, the US Navy publicly revealed the identities of 2 missing SEALs, sparking widespread discussion in society and reminding people of the dangers faced by special forces. It also sends a clear message that the US does not ignore the sacrifices of its soldiers and will seek justice and retribution. This disappearance is closely related to tracking Iran's illegal missile component shipments and the Houthi armed forces in Yemen. In this Middle Eastern chess game, Israel's operational efficiency and intelligence capabilities are unparalleled. The missile attack in Damascus on January 20th is a prime example. Think about it. The top intelligence chief of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard in Syria, being careful everywhere he went, even afraid to carry a cell phone, was still caught by Israel. It was a striking scene, showing Israel's strong intelligence penetration. And unusually, it was Iran that shouted out about being hit, which is rare. For Iran, losing a significant figure seems to unsettle them. After all, they're not like China, where losing a person is as simple as dropping a chopstick. Iran's admission of loss indicates the significance of the strike. It also reflects Israel's intelligence and precision strike capabilities far exceeding those of Iran and Russia. Thinking of Russia, they can't even handle Zelensky, so how could Iran target Israeli officials? They're just bluffing partners in crime. Israel's every move is steady, and each strike is precise and unexpected for the opponent. Iran, facing relentless pursuit by Israel of its proxies in the Middle East and US strikes against the Houthis, only increases its passive situation. Iran tries to exert force through Iraq, stopping US reinforcements and launching missile attacks on US bases, hoping to force US withdrawal. But they miscalculated. The US won't be driven away easily. The US and Iraq have signed agreements, and the US has the Kurds in Iraq who can be called upon. Moreover, the US is not unprepared. On January 22nd, Iraq's Fly Baghdad airline was sanctioned by the US, a significant blow to Iran and its proxies in the Middle East. This airline supported the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the Syrian Republican Guard, Hezbollah, and various jihad groups in Iraq. AK-47s, RPG-7s, grenades, machine guns, and even sacks of dollars were all transported by them. This is why they were sanctioned, with all assets frozen. Many question why the US didn't sanction them earlier. The answer is simple. The US was waiting for the right moment. They have gathered ample intelligence on Iraq, Iran, and even China's every move. As for China, the US is also aware. China may think its secret alliance with Russia or its arms shipments to Russia through North Korea are unknown to the US. But in reality, these actions have long been monitored by the US. In an era of high information transparency, the truth is hard to hide, and the strategic vision and actions of powerful countries are always admirable.